So today we're going to be doing a little bit of inking. This is, of course, the book from author Dwight Schueler. It's called Prison School. What I'm going to do, I'm going to start out by boxing out some of the panels. So as you can see, there's panels that are making up the forefront of this larger panel in the background. So what I'm going to do is break this up more so you can see that this is a division in scenes. How I do that, so I'm going to be using a thicker pen than I used in the interior. What I've done is I've outlined all of these characters that you see using a nib pen. Nib pens have a tip like this, and you dip it into an ink well or some sort of reservoir for ink. So now moving on though to a felt tip pen. This is a Winsor Newton number 8, so it's a 0.8. It's got a larger tip on it, you can see, and this is good for boxing in panels. I'm terrible at making straight lines, so what will happen is after I finish doing this, boxing these in the best I can free-handed, this will be scanned into the computer, and then Gabriel Elzerk will take that and straighten up my lines for me. So it's just something I've never really been too good at, even as careful as I am to use a ruler and careful as I am to try to be as straight as possible with my lines, it always ends up being a little crooked. Now this is a graphic novel, so all the pages are done in this comic style with panels and stuff. The thing that we're trying to do a little different here is the process. So I'm not coloring this. Gabriel Elzerk will be coloring it. He does the flats, and then he goes back in and will actually add color to all of these panels. So this will be a color comic once it's finished. It's something like 82 pages. Dwight is this will be his first book. It's his first book, and as you can see, I already went a little crooked there. This scene is, as you can see, it's an interior of a classroom. So when I was penciling this page, I had to use references from middle school classrooms. This is a math teacher, so I want to incorporate different things dealing with math into the room, so that'll be on the chalkboard later on. So that's not been added yet. Boxes, like I'm doing here, these can be used in different ways, of course, with graphic novels. Sometimes you'll have narration. You'll have this story that will appear inside the boxes. Sometimes a description maybe will appear. The reason I like using thicker lines for the panels, of course, it breaks it up, so you know this is a different either setting or element of the story happening. It breaks it up from what's happening around it. Sometimes with comics you'll see one panel after another in a straight row. Think of like a comic strip. And then often though, you've seen probably in mainstream comics that cartoonists will actually break it up and use different size panels and different locations on the page, and do something a little different. Kind of breaks up your page a little bit more that way. I'm trying to get a little better at that. I'm not the best in the world, but I'm trying. So in this particular scene, I'm not going to give too much of the story away. I'm not even going to share the entire page I'm working on. This is more just kind of a little bit of a glimpse into the project, but just to kind of give you a little bit of a background, there's the main character is coming into the classroom, and he gets in trouble with the teacher. So the teacher gets upset. So that's why you see that the teacher has a disgruntled look. It's primarily due to the character and what happens in the classroom. So what happens is, though, with the story like this, is that I'll read the script, and the script will come in the form, just as you imagine, a text document, a Word document, or pages, whatever you use. And I'll open that up, I'll read it, and sometimes there's a lot of direction. Sometimes the publisher or an author will give you a lot of a direction of what they want on the page. They'll even tell you breakdown of where things will be. They'll break down things like the changes in each panel. Even sometimes you get a description. I apologize for the barking in the background. Other times though, you may not get anything, so it's left up to you to decide what it is you're wanting to do. In this situation, Dwight did provide a lot of direction, so it really helps. So now I'm switching to a 0.3, if I can get it to focus, it's a 0.3 Winsor Newton felt tip brush. This is a little smaller than the 0.8, of course, so what I want to do now is try to get some of these straight lines inside of the panel. So like the desk here, I may play around with this. If it seems like it's a little too thin, I may go back in and use a thicker pen. It just depends really on what it looks like afterwards. But this is a very time constraining project, and all graphic novels are, because there's different phases. So you'll first, of course, read the script. After you read the script, you go back and you pencil a storyboard, and then once you have the storyboard finished, you take that and then you start to actually go in and pencil your pages. Now that's no different than a children's book, really, in terms of planning. You know, so you read the story and you decide what it is you're going to draw and where and how many pages and all that. The difference with a graphic novel, though, is that a lot of the each page has different settings. So in a children's book, you'll have primarily, you know, one certain setting on a page. It might be a forest, or it could be on the moon, or whatever else. But with a graphic novel, though, there's different settings occurring in one page sometimes, or different settings within a setting. And how I describe this with students is that if you think about different settings that you have read about, or even movies you've watched, I'll bring an example of Sherlock Holmes. So with Sherlock Holmes, of course, the main setting is in Britain most of the time, but yet in Britain you have all these different types of sub-settings. So you'll have maybe Sherlock Holmes at a pier with boats, you know, or you'll have him at a hotel, or stockyards, or whatever else. So inside of there being this main setting of a school, you have different settings then too. You have the cafeteria, you have the lunchroom, you have the hallway, principal's office, those sort of things. So you know, there's a lot going on a page sometimes, and it's my responsibility to take the author's direction, or the publisher's direction, and then from there I have to try to develop that into visuals. The inking process is probably my favorite part of all of this, although it's changing a little bit, because you get to the point where you've penciled in all this work and then you get to see it actually darken in, and your lines. I don't keep every line that I draw, and I don't erase every line that I'm not sure about. I'll keep something in there for a little bit and, you know, continue to think about it if I like that here or whatever else. And if I end up liking something a certain way, then I'll keep it. If not, I will change it. It's really easy in this stage to change things, because you just simply choose not to ink it. And then once you go to scan the artwork into the computer, you clean it up by erasing all the pencil lines off that you when you're finished inking. And then once you scan it, you can clean it up using Photoshop or Clip Studio or some program like that, and you can get rid of all the pencil lines. So it's but it's changing, though. My favorite stages of a project. Used to, it was all about, you know, just getting to this point where I ink, and I couldn't wait to ink. Now I'm sort of enjoying the penciling phase a lot, actually, especially with this project. There's, you know, like I said, there's a lot of these subsettings in the story, and I like to see how it's challenging to show what the publisher has in mind, or what direction they give. It's, you know, sometimes it's really challenging to do that visually. So I like a challenge. You know, I think it's fun to see if I can't come up with some way to show or depict whatever it is that the author had in mind, and I think it's fun to do that. As you can see, though, with this book, when I talk about the settings, this panel's floating on top of this larger setting of a classroom, and it's really fun to take the movement of the story and move it into another portion of the story within the same page. You know, it's really neat to see that kind of come about. Sometimes you run into situations like a pen like this, for instance. I have no idea, because the name of this pen has been rubbed off, so I had it for so long. I had 3 of these and ended up now only with 1. But I can tell from using it that the tip is right around probably maybe a 0.1. but you can tell that the tip is a lot different. It has a metal tip. This has an ink cartridge in it, whereas the felt tip pens, they are all enclosed, so you can't add any ink to it, and you can't go in and refill it up or anything like that. So I like these pens a lot with the reservoir in them, because you can go and actually add ink to it. Plus it has the metal tip, which bends a little bit, has a little bit of flexibility, so the more pressure that you put down, the thicker the line may be, and I enjoy that a lot from these pens. Something that I have unfortunately found recently to be a little bit of a problem is, I used to be a huge advocate of rapidograph pens or rotring for inking. Here's an example of this. This is a rotring pen. This is also a reservoir pen, so there's ink inside of it, but as you can see, it has a metal tip, so it's a combination a little bit. You can think of it as being a nib type where it's metal, but it's also a little bit like felt, because it doesn't have the pointed tip for it. It's all enclosed and comes out in one point, so it's a little bit like a felt tip, but nothing really. But one of the unfortunate things about this is, I used to be a huge fan of these pens. I used to have an entire set, and they're a little expensive, so I'd get one at a time. And so over time though, I found that with these pens, if you are not on top of it all the time with these pens, cleaning them, using them, whatever else, then eventually they start to dry up. And once they dry up, if you're not on top of it, then you got a problem, because your pen will absolutely just become ruined. You can't use it anymore. It's unusable, and it really stinks too, because these pens are fun to use. They have a good feel to them. It's a really nice consistent flow of ink to them, so you know you're going to get a consistency in the line that you have. But if you let it dry out at all, you're in trouble. It's going to mess up. But they have a huge variation though with these in terms of the sizes of the tips. So you have everywhere from one of the larger pens like I used earlier, like the 0.8 or the Winsor Newton felt tip, and then you also have all the way down to a 0.15, I think. That's really thin. It's really good for these little detail areas, but when you go to scan, sometimes you'll scan these images in, and if something is just too thin, it's not going to show up very well in the scanning. That's something that I've had to work with and kind of deal with over time too, is realizing that, yeah, I really liked the thinness of this line, but when you go to scan it, it just doesn't show up. Now, it is important though to have a variety of tips and sizes with your pens, because you give the effect as everything in the background of this image, so the lockers that I'm drawing now, that line making up this entire structure in the background, if it's done effectively, needs to be thinner, okay, than the lines in the foreground. So, and that's just because it's further away from you, and I'm not taking so much time with this, trying to be really careful with how straight I'm getting it. I just want the implied lines back here showing that this is a locker, but it is important that they're thinner. It helps to give that effect of it being off in the distance. That's something that honest to goodness, it took me forever to actually realize, and I wish I'd actually realized it a lot sooner, because I've done a lot of comics where I've used the same line across the entire page, and it just has a totally different feel to it than when you use a thinner line for things in the background. But I hope you've enjoyed this little small video, kind of just showing you a little bit of what I've been working on lately. This book's been a really fun project to work on, and I'm going to continue to try to develop it, and we'll get it colored and finished up. It's 82 pages, so it's going to be a little bit, I think Dwight Schueler, the author of this book, for being generous and allowing us to show a little bit of the book as we're working on it. It's always very nice. We don't ever want to show anything that the author doesn't want us to show. So far though, we've been able to share a little bit, and that's been fun. So thanks for checking out my little video. Hopefully I'll be able to do more of these in the future, showing more process, hopefully a little longer next time too. Take care.